Lovely. Thanks so much, Simon. It's lovely to be here. And thanks so much for that lovely introduction. I'm hoping you can all now see the slides that I'm presenting there. Very good. Excellent. Thanks so much. So delighted to be here and talking about education for collective intelligence. Collective intelligence is really important in our efforts to solve problems together as a group, living species. The most important driver, I believe, of collective intelligence in human systems is education. With quality education and training, collective intelligence groups can operate at many different levels of complexity to address a range of problems from very simple to very complex. At the outer range of complexity, we have global problems that are salient to many groups, and the need for collective intelligence to address sustainable well-being challenges is reflected in the design of internationally recognized sustainable development goals. Well, we don't expect children in schools or young people in college to work at the outer range of complexity here. I believe it's reasonable to expect education system designers to provide foundational collective intelligence education that helps future generations to address and design, manage complex systems. To do this, we need to build CI skills from simple to complex across the lifespan. And we need to build CI educational infrastructure across generations. Collective intelligence itself is a very dynamic phenomena. It is a capacity that emerges as an assembly of moving parts. Importantly, the capabilities we associate with individual intelligence, our ability to observe, focus, analyze, remember, create, empathize, judge, decide, and select wise actions together in context, can emerge at the group level as part of the CI process. CI emerges when individual contributions are combined either through direct or indirect engagement to become more than the sum of their parts. In a CI process, people can work together directly, for example, a group of students sitting around a table and working together on a maths problem, or indirectly, for example, a group of students working asynchronously across multiple schools to input and code data for a citizen science project. The group can be small or potentially very large, and also CI can be more or less orchestrated using specific tools and methods, and it can be more or less supported by machine and AI capabilities. We learn something about our own CI behavior by studying the behavior of other species. For example, we see swarm behavior in many species. Birds and fish adaptively evade predators by moving together as a group, usually following simple behavioral algorithms that can be analyzed as statistical rules. In human systems, similar swarm behavior based on averaging many independent perceptions, judgments, predictions can produce wisdom of the crowd effects. And under certain conditions, this type of swarm behavior can help humans to arrive at reasonable group level estimates, predictions, insights, or evaluations. In addition to swarm behavior, we have stigmergy, a mechanism of indirect coordination, where a trace is left in the environment by an individual action, and this trace stimulates the performance of a succeeding action by a group member. For example, ants will leave pheromone traces that stimulate other ants to follow specific pathways to and from food sources. In this way, they craft and recraft a map of their territory that supports collective navigation. Human groups also coordinate around traces in their environment in ways that support group members accessing and optimizing solutions to problems. This is seen in the traces we leave online, for example, when individuals rate an existing solution, for example, an educational video online, or edit a solution, for example, editing an argument map online, or editing an article online. And a third mechanism we see in human systems, the collective intelligence mechanism, is collaborative behavior, which can manifest in many different ways to address many different problems. Importantly, research has identified a general group performance or intelligence factor, the C factor, that predicts collaborative problem solving over and above the effects of individual intelligence. Features of effective collaborative problem solving include working well with others, cognitive diversity, equal participation, and joint coordination. And when it comes to education for collective intelligence, we can view this as a lifespan development goal, a process of moving through different skill levels in our education training. I think that all of us attending this symposium can work together to map out this territory of skill development. And in doing so, we might reflect on two questions. First, how do we innovate our curriculum and pedagogy to develop CI functional capabilities? The ability of groups to observe, analyze, remember, create, empathize, and judge together. And second, what CI infrastructures do we need to build to support skill development? What tools, methods, common standards, and rules, institutions, and networks do we need to build? In our paper on education for collective intelligence, we make a few points. First, drawing upon foundational swarm, stigmergy, and collaborative dynamics, there is potential for design of increasingly complex and integrated CI action systems, supporting group problem solving and project work. Secondly, there's good potential to use project-based learning as a basis for CI skill development, as it motivates purposeful learning and drives on skill development. And third, the good news is that there are many tools and methods already available that we can integrate and build upon. I won't go into detail here, but our paper summarizes research in relation to a number of promising tools and methods that support CI in the classroom. And an important cultural trend also supporting the development of CI education is the meaningful connection with the world of work, where people are increasingly being called upon to work together in a team structure. And while the science of team and collective intelligence lags behind the science of individual intelligence, CI science is catching up, and more basic science is likely to be translated into increasingly robust CI education training programs in the coming years. At the University of Galway, we've worked to build upon the vision of John Warfield, past president of the International Society for Systems Sciences, to develop a collective intelligence education program. Our program applies project-based learning to the goal of applied system design. Central to this program is training in the use of tools that support team-based collective intelligence, and also the development of talents and teamwork skills essential for collective intelligence design work. Our approach integrates system thinking tools and argument mapping tools designed to help students understand and address complex societal problems. We've sought to build skills from simple to more complex over the course of the undergraduate curriculum, with the first-year module focused on critical and collaborative inquiry as foundational, and then a third-year module that introduces students to applied systems science and the facilitation of groups in the application of systems thinking methods. We've written also about the need for culture change in education more generally, in particular the need to move from monological to dialogical modes of teaching and learning. And in our approach to CI education, we propose developing a curriculum that includes group and project-based work focused on A, the understanding of systems, B, the understanding of group dynamics relevant to the management and design of systems, and C, skill in the application of applied systems science methods that can be used by groups in the management and redesign of systems. We also see the need to coordinate academic disciplines to further develop tools and methods to support team-based system design project work. And of course, we're very happy to share all of our program information details and publication details with everyone here. Here's my email address for follow-up. And I'll pass over now to Imogen. Imogen's going to talk about a paper that we have in press, which focuses on how artificial intelligence can support collective intelligence education. So passing over to you now, Imogen.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, so I'm going to talk about, as Mike said, a study in which we sought to develop a framework for design-based research into artificial intelligence to support education for collective intelligence. So we derived the framework from a literature review, which focused on examining the intersection of artificial intelligence and collective intelligence in educational contexts. And we were interested in collective intelligence that encompassed the things that Mike was talking about, that wasn't just about solving problems set by others, but about posing questions and working together to answer them. So I'm going to talk about the process and the framework, but very briefly, I'm going to start by talking about what we meant by AI in this context. So a number of definitions there, one from Margaret Bowden, who's written extensively on AI, the history of AI, Marvin Minsky, and more recent one from UNICEF, the commonalities of being able to do the sorts of things that minds can do. I should say the papers that we looked at predated the emergence of ChatGPT into the public realm. So they are mainly not, or in fact entirely not, based on large language models, although we expect to see a lot of work in this area, but they are based, according to this Euler diagram, more on the upper circle of artificial intelligence and machine learning. So the research questions that guided this study, we were interested in what ways AI was being used to support the teaching and learning of collective intelligence today. How is it being used to support induction into participation in communities learning together? And in what ways could it be used to support communities getting better at learning together? Thank you. So the search terms we adapted largely from a paper published by Nesta in 2022 that looked at the intersection of CI and AI and offered a descriptive history of what research into CI and AI over the last 20 years. But to those, we added terms related to education. As you can see, we systematically searched a number of databases. We also used an AI tool, Elicit, and we identified additional records through snowball search, including a search using our keywords in the Journal of Artificial Intelligence in Education. We screened the titles and abstracts to see whether they seem to be focused on that conjunction of CI, AI, and learning. And then when we read the full text articles, we excluded any that didn't contain empirical research or which didn't seem to focus on that conjunction of CI, AI, and learning. And so that left us with 46 papers from which we derived the framework. So we initially captured details for comparison in a spreadsheet, so questions, methodologies, frameworks for comparison. We went through a process of comparing these, and we arrived at an initial concept map. which we then divided the concepts among the groups, read the papers again in more detail, and went through a series of iterations and mind maps as we tried to, I think we can see one in slightly larger, because I think the text is probably a bit small there, but enabled us to start to see some of the more disparate concepts started to form into the framework that we were, that started to emerge. And as that started to happen, we noticed there were some similarities to the existing computer-supported collaborative learning literature, and we were able to triangulate the themes emerging and the framework emerging from our primary literature review with those concepts and categories, and certainly there seemed to be some similarities and crossover there. One of the first things that we noted was that many of the papers had AI embedded into the environment. So that could be cameras in a classroom, or it could be in a platform of some kind, and it might be monitoring aspects of discourse and perhaps acting as a dashboard for a teacher. But it might also be presented as an agent or persona that individuals or groups might interact with. So that was a distinction that we saw. In terms of the broader framework, we identified 3 categories. AI might be employed to help form and select groups, so that's relevant to induction into groups. And there's certainly some research that CI may be partially dependent on group formation. So that seemed to be an important area. Additionally, there were many projects and studies where AI supported the microprocesses of dialogue, deliberation, and collaboration within groups. So that could be agents prompting groups or prompting teachers to come or assistants to come and help groups. And finally, we could see AI supporting staging or the macro processes of idea generation or problem solving in much larger groups where they might not be talking synchronously or asynchronously, but they were working together on a larger project. So this is the framework that emerged, and as you can see, we have those 3 categories that I just described: grouping, process, and staging, and also operating at various different sizes. So some studies attempted to help individuals develop some of the capabilities that Mike was mentioning. Others attempted to support small groups, larger groups, or even unbounded groups of people. And you can see the numbers of papers that we found in each area there. So the aim of this study was to act as a starting point for design-based research into other ways in which AI might support education for collective intelligence, in terms of developing the theoretical foundations, expanding the design framework by means of design experiments, looking at what appears to be effective or more or less effective. So I won't talk in great detail, I haven't got time, about design-based research, but there's recently a pamphlet published at the Faculty of Education in Cambridge, and a number of books on the area if you're interested in the approach. As Mike said, the paper's in press. It should be published quite soon. So if you're interested, please do email me, and I can send you a link as soon as it is published. And I can now pass on to Rupert to talk more about the theory of education and AI.
Oh, thanks very much, Imogen and Mike. So we've been learning about some of the tools and processes of how education with technology can support collective intelligence. So I'm now going to feed back into a few ideas about education, about the theory of education, drawing these ideas from this recently published book with Louis Major. And we argue that education as a discipline is essentially asking the question, what should we teach and learn? And also, how should we teach and learn it? And of course, why should we teach and learn it? So this isn't a question that we can avoid, especially in the light of the polycrisis and the meta-crisis that Simon was talking about. We have a responsibility. There's no real choice here. So what should we be focusing on? It seems that AI has disrupted the current education system. There's a lot of concern. We're certainly getting messages from higher up about how we ought not to let students should not be using it and should be suffering with the existing system. But increasingly, AI can perform better than students on the kind of assessments that we have. This is just a random. I took an article from the news saying that AI-generated exam responses in undergraduate psychology outperformed human students. But if AI can do better at these assessments, surely we should be questioning the focus of our education system. Why is it so focused on print literacy and on reading and writing? Why do we have these kind of exams which don't seem to be fit for purpose in the modern world? Of course, the print literacy regime which gave birth to this education system, you can trace it historically to people like Comenius in the 17th century, basing it on the affordances of the Gutenberg printing press of textbooks and so on. And of course, this global focus on literacy and education has led to a massive, I would say, advance in collective intelligence. Well, we can argue this, but well, I won't go into any details because we haven't got very little time. But at the same time, these different media, the legacy media, you might say, of print literacy has certain limiting affordances. Simon mentioned that he met me at the Open University. He sounds like he was there slightly later than me. I arrived in the early 90s at a group led by Tim O'Shea. And at that time, artificial intelligence was the new revolution in education. But was it really? They were producing these intelligent tutoring systems with student models and domain models. And of course, that kind of thing has had a big impact. Squirrel AI, for instance, in China has reached about 20 million people. But I would argue that it's been used to insert itself into the existing education system rather than to challenge it and explore new models. I think this advent of new technology forces us to question what education is for and what we're doing in education. There's a rather complex argument in the book about how education has always been technological. It's not actually very complex. Sorry, do read the book. It's very simple. But the point is that technology is always then mediating the present moment with a larger dialogue of culture. It's always mediating the individual with a collective identity, but it's doing so in different ways. And with this advent of this very new technology, which is an AI-enhanced internet, as I would say the dominant mode of communication moving beyond print literacy, we have an exciting new opportunity we should at least explore. Obviously, there are new risks and threats as well. And I think this new opportunity is an education that's focusing on dialogue as an end and as a means to collective intelligence. I rather like this image of the Deepwater Horizon oil spill. It's an example of where people were called upon, geographically dispersed experts using digital tools to solve the problem, and they signally failed. It kept blurping oil for months and months, while on the news they kept trying different things. And of course, education hadn't really prepared them for this challenge, and yet it's a challenge that many professions now face of having to work together in teams. As Mike mentioned, it's increasingly important for employers and for everyone to be able to do so. But beyond that, for me, it's an image of the future challenges we face, referred to by Simon. Things like global warming with the temperature rising every year. Also, the incredible challenge of how do we cope with what's going on with the internet, with the AI-enhanced internet and the way it's steamrollering democracies around the world, basically there's a need for education that, instead of moving forward from existing technology, hangs itself from the future, from the challenges we need to face, and prepares people to face them. So this idea of dialogue is beyond the traditional notion of dialogue between people. It raises the question of, what do we mean by dialogue? And it's also looking at this idea of dialogue with technology, an idea proposed by the French philosopher Gilbert Simondon as the means for trans-individuality, that we're not merely isolated individuals, that through a connection with communications technology, which might be oracy, which might be cave paintings and sculptures, but might also, of course, beyond print literacy now be the internet, we can move forward into a collective identity. And I think in a way this is illustrated by this rather old experiment by Weizenbaum in the 60s, rather beautifully illustrated what he called artificial stupidity, because I think we should question this whole nonsense fantasy idea about intelligence. These are language assistants. So this very simple program based on a client-centered counselor would reflect back on its question, as it would say, we're not talking about me, we're talking about you, tell me about your problems. It pattern matched. If you use the word mother, it would say, oh, tell me more about your mother. And some people spent hours solving their problems with it. So this actually illustrates what a real dialogue isn't necessarily two separate consciousnesses, as the psychologists have often claimed, but it's actually a movement into dialogic space, a space where all the signs resonate together and there can be new creative emergence. And this can be achieved with technology as well as with people. So rethinking what we mean by dialogue and by dialogic emergence in education, we argue in the book that it's not so much a dialogue between two separate consciousnesses as a dialogue between an inside perspective and an outside perspective. Thinking thought of not as a representation in a book, but more as a spark that emerges in the tension of different perspectives. And when we realize that, that's quite interesting for thinking about the role of technology in education, and particularly the role of AI. If we look at large language models like ChatGPT, you can see that they are building on a vast outside of information, that they're trawling the internet to produce billions of data points, which potentially represent everything that's been thought and said and written down in the past, such that a student in the moment, or a small group of students questioning the AI, is creating in that moment a collective intelligence that makes a bridge using the technology between that moment and the long-term dialogue of culture, and between those individuals and the much larger community that they're joining. So this dialogue with technology is itself potentially collective intelligence, but it's only collective intelligence if we educate for dialogue, if we educate for asking better questions, which is in many ways a return. I think Simon mentioned indigenous cultures. Socrates, the so-called father of Western philosophy, was an oral thinker who was rather skeptical of writing. He didn't like it very much. And he argued that thinking occurs in the questioning of perspectives, and that the important thing to teach is asking better questions. So in a way, returning to Socrates, combining that with the technology, we have the prospect and possibility of a double dialogic pedagogy. The first dialogic, teaching people to think but ask questions, but the second is to use that to participate actively in longer, larger term dialogues mediated by AI. And we're doing a number of projects in DEFI, Digital Education Futures Initiative at Cambridge, where Imogen and I work to pursue these ideas. So I just want to finish with the vision that Imogen mentioned of design-based research. I believe with aviation, it wasn't just the appliance of science to technology. It was a lot of people experimenting. They knew they wanted to fly. They didn't know how to. They tried and they developed aviation. In a similar way, we want collective intelligence. We want a self-regulating thoughtful planet. So we know what to achieve, and we're doing lots of experiments to see how we can shape pedagogy and technology to achieve that. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rupert, Imogen, and Mike, for that opening keynote. I hope you can hear the deafening applause that's virtual. I'll give you a little Zoom clap there. One day, I remember back in the Knowledge Media Institute at the Open University when I joined the OU in 1995, we were working with a strange new technology called Java. And we were actually simulating huge crowd noise coming in over the internet to create that sort of sense of telepresence. So I hope you can hear Wembley Stadium applauding. Okay, I'm going to throw it open to our panel. Does anybody want to make a comment on that intro talk? It's got us going beautifully. Who wants to respond to one of those, any of those points? Okay, while you're thinking, I was struck by that slide, Rupert, where you talked about the emergence between a living inner, that is the human, and a dead outer, that is the machine. Can you just expand a little bit on that? I think that's interesting, especially with regard to perhaps what Zach Stein is going to be talking about shortly. I think you were saying that we can have extremely productive dialogue between a dead outer and a living inner. We don't have to worry. We don't have to make the claim that the machine is anything intelligent or anything comparable to us ontologically, but we can still have extremely productive dialogue and reflection. Is that what you were saying?
Yes, yes. It's funny when you put it that way. Of course, that is what I was saying. But I think the dialogic distinction that was brought in by Socrates is between the living voice and dead meaning. He argued that writing was dead because it couldn't respond. It was, he called it like seeds left out in the sun so that they died. He was, of course, exaggerating. You can't animate the writing. So it's not about humans versus machines. It's about living speech versus dead speech. There's a phrase from somewhere about the letter kills, but the spirit brings life. And so I'm saying that on its own, the technology without the human in the loop is essentially dead. Yes, it's not knowledge, it's not wisdom, it's information. But it can be animated by a question, by a challenge in the moment. And I think education through project-based learning, small groups, individuals, asking questions of the AI, working with the AI is about animating it, bringing it to life so that students can participate in that larger process of flourishing. So really, I think of the machine as part of the human body, as an extension of the human body. I'm not trying to distinguish between humans and machines. It's a slightly different sort of dialectic, if that makes sense.
All right, fascinating. Anybody else want to chip in from our panel? Aldo.
Yeah, thanks for a very interesting range of talks. One thing that really strikes me, I really love, Rupert, your end note of this life force that you really try to unleash, literally. So it's not about dead technology, it's about galvanizing dialogue and making it come alive and energetic. And at the same time, we also need, as Mike, for example, at the beginning was saying, these infrastructures. If there's anything dead, there's normally infrastructure. But we do need infrastructure if we want to scale things, if we want to embed things in all kinds of processes and institutions and networks. So there's continuous tension between that life force that wants to break free and the institutions that we need, the infrastructures we need to harness it. And I'm also going to talk about it in my talk, but that's just, it's not even a question, but maybe you can reflect on that, but it's that tension that I always feel. And how can we get that very creative life force and that kind of socio-technical infrastructure that we need? How can we combine it? What are the intersection points between these two very different worlds that need each other?
No, it's a very good reflection.
Okay. Other points from our panel? Anna.
Yeah, thank you. I had a question for Michael. During his presentation, he said something that really, interests me. He talked about a collective intelligence infrastructure that we ought to build across generations. And I just wanted him to elaborate a little bit on that and what he meant by that, because I am recently intrigued by the dimension of time in the development of collective intelligence. And yeah, so I just wanted to hear what you meant by that. Can't hear you. I don't know if everyone else can. No.
Mike, you're on mute.
We seem to have lost Mike.
Oh,
Okay, Mike, try that again. This is no, we're not picking you up, I'm afraid. Okay, I don't know whether anybody else wants to respond on that. Maybe Mike can type.
Can I then ask another question to Rupert then? While Mike.
no, I'm very interested in time. I mean, we talk about dialogic space and the expansion of dialogic space, but it's also very much the expansion of dialogic time and this connection through education to the larger time network. Is that what you were asking about, mediated by technology as part of collective intelligence?
No, I mean, like I am now intrigued by some forms of swarm intelligence or human swarm intelligence. And in that, I have this idea that in order for certain serendipitous collective intelligence to emerge, interaction need to be quite timely and quite kind of with interaction between people almost at the same time in a high frequency and in the same moment. So I'm really interested into, and in that sense, Aristotle would say that's why, because it has to be alive, it has to be interactive, so it has to be very timely. So I'm thinking, all right, so for collective intelligence to emerge, there has to be something quite short-term, quite dynamic, quite immediate. But at the same time, we want to build the collective intelligence infrastructure that work through generation, because we believe there is a form of wisdom that passed through, through our cultures, right? So it's almost like there are different time scale of how we should study collective intelligence systems or development, both at different time granularity. I don't know. I was just, I'm just very kind of, I don't know what's the answer. I just that's why I wanted to ask your take on this.
Yeah, there's a nice article by Jay Lemke about the different timescales and the way in which education is always integrating them together, which I think is about the role of technology to support education into collective intelligence, because you mentioned the transmission of wisdom, but of course that doesn't always happen, does it? If it's dead, if it's obscure to us. I'm very acutely aware of the amount of wisdom that we seem to have lost, wisdom that enabled life to function, including, as Simon mentioned, in small-scale societies, but also in our own societies. So if it becomes dead and if it becomes something alien and it's not animated, so perhaps the role of education into collective intelligence is to reanimate dead time, to re-embody ourselves in the wholeness of time.
Okay, I'm seeing Dracula
like
and Frankenstein images are appearing in front of my mind now.
Not in that bad way. I do like it.
Reanimation. I'm loving it. Okay, I'm going to jump in here as a good chair and just say, draw that conversation to a pause, not a close, I hope, but a pause. And invite Zach Stein to share his screen so that we can keep to time, make sure everybody gets good time.